remember the way that you looked at your parents as a child? Or maybe the way your children looked at you when they were young? I think often of the 2002 Super Bowl Home Depot commercial. In it, there's a little boy playing with his friends, and he's bragging to them that his father can build anything. The dad has promised his son that he will build him a treehouse. Then the screen switches over and you see the father looking cluelessly at home in the Home Depot warehouse section. The boy is then seen bragging to his friends, telling them, "My father can build anything. Trust me, anything." The screen then switches over to his dad, and he says to the staff at Home Depot, "I have never built anything before in my life. I don't have a clue what I'm doing." I think we all remember the moment that we first realized that our parents are not perfect. For me, it was on Yom Kippur when I was a boy. My father is a pediatrician and has been in over 80 magazines as one of the top doctors in his field in the United States. Naturally, I always heard from my school friends growing up about how great my dad is and how he helped cure them when they were sick. As comes with the job of being a doctor, my father has a pager that constantly is beeping all hours of the day and night. On this Yom Kippur, he had turned off his pager so that he didn't disturb congregants while they were praying, or as we like to joke, while they were sleeping during the rabbi's sermon. Later in the day, my father commented on how he had not received any pages all day and how unusual that is. He looked down and with great horror realized that he had forgotten to turn his pager back on. As soon as he turned the pager back on, he noticed that a family had had an emergency and had tried calling him numerous times. He frantically called the doctor that had covered for him and also the family and apologized profusely, saying that this had never happened before and would never happen again. Seeing my father apologize at the time was traumatic, as I realized that he was, like everyone else, human and not this perfect being that I had made him out to be. Growing up, I would see both of my parents make more and more mistakes. And they would tell me, especially when I was learning how to drive, "Don't worry, I made that same mistake when I was your age." I reflected on that Yom Kippur afternoon and admired my father more for having apologized and taken responsibility for his actions. In reading this week's Parsha, Vayeira, we look at Abraham Avinu, our father Abraham's actions. As I mentioned on Rosh Hashanah, I am disappointed with Abraham's actions over his lack of protest to sacrificing his son Isaac in the Akedah after having pleaded with God not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. However, if we look before the Akedah at chapter 20 in Genesis, we see Abraham make a grave error as a husband and leader. In this chapter, Abraham and Sarah come to the city of Gerar to meet King Abimelech. Abraham tells Abimelech that Sarah is his sister, basically allowing him to have his way with her. After he would be done having his way with her, then he would reward Abraham as her brother. A similar incident occurs earlier in the Torah with the couple and the Pharaoh of Egypt. But in that event, Abraham was forced to go to Egypt to escape a severe drought and famine. And he legitimately feared for his life, as Sarah was so beautiful that Pharaoh would kill him if he knew that Abraham was her husband. In the earlier story, Sarah is an active participant in the scheme. However, in this week's Parsha, Sarah is told to go along with the plot, and she's never given a chance to agree or speak for herself. In this circumstance, Pikuach Nefesh, the saving of a life, does not seem to be as applicable as was the case in the story of Egypt, when they were under threat, as Abraham was given no initial rationale for why he has made this claim. After Abraham gives Sarah over to Abimelech, Abimelech has a dream in which God tells him that he has committed a great sin because Sarah is a married woman. Abimelech defends himself to God, saying that he has been told that she was Abraham's sister, so why should he be punished? He was aware of any wrongdoing. God acknowledges that Abimelech did this with a blameless heart, and therefore should not be punished. But he must return Sarah to Abraham in the morning. In the morning, Abimelech confronts Abraham and says, "What have you done to us? What wrong have I done that you should bring so great a guilt upon me in my kingdom? You have done to me things that ought not to be done. What then was your purpose in doing this thing?" Rashi and Ramban, both medieval commentators, acknowledge that Abraham has committed a sin, which almost led to an even greater sin. Though certain actions of Abraham's, such as the binding of Isaac, have been fiercely debated as to whether or not he did the right or wrong action, this action by him seems to be universally condemned. For the first time, we are all seeing our Father as an imperfect being. Unfortunately, Abraham gives weak excuses instead of taking responsibility for his actions. In response to Abimelech's interrogations, Abraham stammers, "I thought, surely there is no fear of God in this place, and that they will kill me because of my wife. And besides, she is in truth my sister, my father's daughter, though not my mother's, and so she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's household, that I said to her, This is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother." This is not the first time that Abraham claims he has assumed that Abraham claims that he assumed that Abimelech was not a God-fearing man. And perhaps he is coming up with an explanation on the spot. Also, where is his own faith in God if this accusation is true? Furthermore, most people read, "God caused me to wander from my father's household," as a reference to last week's Parsha, Lech Lecha, when God instructs Abraham to go to the land of Canaan. However, I read this slightly differently. Perhaps Abraham is saying that God caused him to wander from his father's household, referencing what is expected of him morally, thus putting the responsibility on God for his own moral transgressions. Following Abraham's explanation, Abimelech apologizes to Sarah and compensates Abraham for the sin that was nearly committed. However, Sarah says nothing in response to Abimelech, suggesting her fury at having been a pawn in this scheme, for which Abraham profits. In order to make sure that Abimelech returns Sarah to Abraham unviolated, God has the wombs of Abimelech's wife and his female slaves closed so that he cannot produce an offspring. Seeing that Abimelech is a God-fearing man, Abraham prays to God to heal the women of their barrenness. Again, this bothers me greatly. As we have read, Sarah suffers great emotional distress for not being able to bear a child for decades. Yet, Abraham never prayed on behalf of his own wife, yet now he prays on behalf of a man whom he just met because he is in an awkward situation. Through his deceit, refusal to take responsibility, and neglect of his wife Sarah, Abraham no longer appears to me as a holy man of God, but instead a flawed man for the first time. Throughout this week's Parsha, Abraham will let me down as a father on more occasions as he casts out his son Ishmael and agrees to sacrifice his son Isaac. Yet, despite the great disappointment in Abraham that I feel when reading through this Parsha, in a way, my love for him actually grows. In chapter 26 of Genesis, we see our patriarch Isaac, the son of Abraham, make the exact same mistake as he tells a king Abimelech of Gerar that Rebekah is not his wife, but instead his sister in order to obtain riches. We will read of Jacob tricking his blind, dying father into blessing him over his brother Esau. We will read of Moses losing his temper and being punished by God. And though not in the Torah, we read of King David sending a man to his death in order to marry that man's wife. For this action, David suffers extreme ramifications at the hand of God. Vayeira has the letters Resh Aleph, in its root, meaning in Hebrew, to see, which I feel is very appropriate. For this week, we see Abraham and the later biblical figures for whom they are, not gods, but men who are as imperfect as you and me. Yet, they are still able to serve as parents and models for us in our lives, and we owe our presence today to them. I am grateful that these stories are included in the Torah so that we can see these figures as normal human beings despite perhaps our unrealistic expectations. And know that if they can still be patriarchs and matriarchs of a great nation and have a close, loving relationship with God, imperfect people like us can too. Shabbat Shalom.